This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
It sounds like one of the names they would have for a monarch. It's like Queen Javia the First, Black Radical Queer, among queer Negro women.
All the way from the A, you listen to my favorite lesbian on BRQ.
I'm on my black girl magic voodoo shit, with the bamboo earrings on some new shit. I'm new when this money asking who this bitch. I'm the bitch with the pussy with the judo grip.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole. Welcome back to Black Radical Queer Podcast. So today it's just me getting some solo action, but I just wanted to come to you all to just talk about what's on my mind, some things I see circulating that have caught my attention that I'm sure that, you know, a lot of you have seen as well. So yeah, I'll just get right to it. Okay, so those of you who have been listening to me for a while, especially since like the beginning, know that I always say like Black women over everything. But, there's some Black women who have done some things or just like, they've done some things that make them a bit of an exception. They are just prime examples of all your skin folk ain't your kinfolk. And now that I'm aware that I have listeners from other places, you may or may not know kind of what that sentiment means, but basically, just because you have certain commonalities with someone does not make them automatically aligned with you. So just because we're both women does not mean that we're on the same page. Just because we're both Black doesn't mean we're on the same page, or just because we're people of color, or just because we're both queer, whatever, just because we have this commonality does not mean that we are on the same page. We can definitely not see eye to eye, not value and prioritize the same things. So I definitely have a couple of examples of Black women who are definitely like that sentiment personified. It's just like okay, girl. we not seeing eye to eye on that. So I will start with let's start with Erykah Badu. All right. Now, I listened to Erykah Badu. Well, I did. I don't really listen to her as anywhere near as much as I used to. She's not like really in my rotation anymore. But Erykah Badu is to me like a Hotep's wet dream. Like she's just like the perfect, I guess like pick me, or just, I don't know, like Hotep queen. And I say that because she definitely, the stuff that she says, she definitely will center men. She definitely centers, I feel like she centers men in her rhetoric. And even though she like talks about spirituality and all that kind of stuff, and that was partially kind of what was part of her appeal for me. I mean, she can sing, and but I mean, I thought she was kind of like on some other shit in a good way. Like just I just thought that she was creative, and just like, I don't know, just that her thinking challenged kind of like the status quo and stuff like that. But she has proven me wrong on something that's very important to me. And so basically with like all the R. Kelly stuff going on, I won't get too deep into that because I ain't even trying to get on a soapbox about his girl self. But anyway, with all that going on though, apparently she did a show in Chicago, and she she commented on it. Commented on everything going on with him, and was basically like, he basically just expressing that, she supported him, and I don't know, basically kind of like, well, that's my brother, I'm gonna support my brother type of situation. And I'm just like, and even if, and not like she was, like, oh, well, he didn't do it or anything like that, but she's one of those people who, the way that she talks about it is kind of almost from like a neutral place, or just, I don't know. I feel like it's an issue that you can't really be neutral on. But she's kind of like, oh, well, okay, let me just backtrack, because let me go to this article and I'll share a quote. So she was like, what if one of the people who was assaulted by R. Kelly becomes an offender? We're going to crucify them too? And then she was like, she asked they said the audience member said that she asked the crowd to keep their opinions to themselves. And I'm just like, okay, so this is problematic because, for one, she's talking about R. Kelly as being crucified as if he is not wrong. Like, for someone being crucified, basically is like you're asserting that the backlash that they're getting, or like the punishment doesn't fit the crime, or they're getting backlash that is exaggerated, or that is like way beyond what they've done. And that is not the case when you look at R. Kelly, who has a history of decades, literally decades of assault and pedophilia and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's not, what he's going through is not crucifixion. He's not being crucified because he did it. Like, he has to be held accountable. So being held accountable is not being crucified. So like the punishment, like he still is not locked up. So he still has not, gotten the punishment that's really warranted for his behavior. So he's not being crucified. But then it's like, you're giving an opinion and then you want to tell people to keep their opinion to themselves. Like, so you're just like, I'm gonna say what I gotta say, but like, y'all keep your opinions to yourself. Like, what the hell? So it's just sound like some bullshit to me. I would have been pissed if I was at that show. And you're in Chicago, so you're already like in very sensitive territory. And the crowd was like, we ain't with this shit. So she should have kept her opinion to herself. Talking about this man being crucified. So yeah, nah, Erica. So it reminded me, which some people brought up too. It reminded me of that time where Erica was like, oh, well, she was talking about like the way girls dress. And she was like, yeah, if a man sees, of course, I'm paraphrasing, like, but this is the sentiment. If a man sees a young girl in a skirt or something like that, like, yeah, it's his, or a dress or something like that, it's in his nature to like feel some kind of way. It's in his nature for that to catch his attention. It's in his nature for like that to be basically like arousing to him, or, and I'm just like, what the fuck? So the responsibility is on a young girl. Like, a young girl can't just wear what the fuck she wants to wear because it's going to attract a certain type of attention from a man. So as opposed to, calling men out like, hey, this is wrong. Like, that's a child, a whole entire child. And if you're having any type of attraction, urges, or like, desire to pursue this child, it is a problem. But instead it's like, oh, it's in a man's nature, girls should wear longer skirts. So it's the child's fault for the behavior of grown ass men. Oh, okay. So that's what I mean. It's like, from her perspective, there's this, men are just like, what's the word? Absolved. There's this absolution of men from accountability and responsibility. It's like, oh, well, when they're held accountable, they're being crucified, and then so it's just, it makes no sense to me. It's ridiculous to me. So I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling that at all. It also makes me want, like, before this situation came out, but like before, folks came out talking about her comments, I posted this status because when the R. Kelly the Lifetime documentary thing came out, a lot of people were, started saying all this stuff about, well, some girls are fast and some girls look grown and blah, 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 or just all this other shit. And so I posted this status basically saying, like, stop calling our girls fast. Like, just stop it. Because it is taking the responsibility that belongs to grown ass people and placing it on children. And for me, it's just like, we, especially Black girls, and Black boys too, like, Black children already, it's like their childhood is limited. They don't get to be fucking kids. Like, they are seen as older than they are. And it's bullshit. I mean, they will look at, like, let's say Tamir Rice and be like, oh, well, misquote how old he is. He was a little boy. Or see these young girls and like, oh, that's a woman or whatever, when that is clearly a child. So there's already this tendency to age Black children to be older than they are. Whereas, with white folks, it's like they get to be kids or childlike for much longer. Like when those guys went to like the Olympics or whatever, and I think it was in China, and they did some shit they ain't have no business doing, and they were like, oh, well, they're just being boys and all that. But these are grown ass men in their 30s. Like, they grown as hell, so they get to be boys, but young ass Black children, are seen as older and all that kind of stuff. And because of that, having more responsibility, seen as being more culpable for things that they should not be because they are children. And so that's the issue with that whole fast rhetoric by saying, well, she was asking for it, or she, approached him or whatever. These are children. These are teenagers. So if you have a young girl, let's say she's 14, and you say, well, it's her fault because she dressed a certain way to try to get this guy's attention. But she's a child. Like, she's thinking as a child. Her brain is not fully developed. Like, her reasoning and her logic and her decision-making skills are not at an adult level yet. So why is a 14-year-old expected to make adult decisions when you have a grown-ass man who should be acting as an adult and make the adult decision? So even if she does, try to get his attention or whatever, he shouldn't have any interest. He shouldn't pursue it. He shouldn't take her up on anything because that's a child and he's an adult. It doesn't make sense. So to say, well, some of these girls look older. Okay, well, if you need to be clear, like, you shouldn't have any doubt in your mind about the age of the person that you're involved with. Like, and guys like to throw this thing around about like, oh, someone has to check ID. If that's what you have to do, then fucking do it. Like, if you need to check some ID, then you need to check some ID. Because these are young, these are children. And so you shouldn't be okay with engaging with children in that way. And the onus should not be on children. It should not be on these young girls that are being preyed upon. So I just ain't got time for it. It really irritates me. It pisses me off because it puts so much weight on children to be the responsible person, which I just think is so totally and utterly ridiculous. And somebody made a good point. I think, it was actually, it's a Facebook friend of mine named Gabrielle. Gabrielle was like, she said there are grown-ass women being tricked by, adult men. There are grown-ass women who keep, they've been in crazy situations with these guys. They've been misled and all that kind of stuff, controlled, abused and all that by, I'm paraphrasing, but this is her sentiment, that grown-ass women have gone through shit with men and been manipulated by men. And these are adults. So you expect children to be able to basically avoid that. You expect children to not be subjected to that or to be able to like see through that when there are adults who are successfully being manipulated. And that's valid as fuck because, this is a 30-year-old versus a 14-year-old. It's totally normal for like the 30-year-old to go through some stuff and be manipulated, but you expect the 14-year-old to know better. You expect the 14-year-old to be the person who the responsibility falls on. And that's crazy. Like, it makes no sense. So I think that she made a really good point when she said that. But anyway, so I say all that to say, Erica, it's a no from me, dog. Like, nah, it's gonna be a no. All right, so that's one of them situations where I'm like, okay, y'all know I say black women over everything, but sis is wrong. She wrong. Like, I just can't with her. All right, so I'm moving on. My next black woman who is an exception to the black women over everything would be your girl Kamala Harris. Okay, so Kamala announced that she's going to run for president. And a lot of people are like excited and they're like, yeah, I'm going to support her and all this kind of stuff. And my thing is, I'm not going to support her just because she's a black woman. I wish it were that easy, but I have to look at what her track record is and what her, the way that what her leanings are, as opposed to just blindly, supporting her. And my issue with Kamala is that Kamala is not like progressive on prison reform. Like, she is like, I think someone described it as a super cop. Like, the things that she has supported, mass incarceration. She supported, like people who were like, let's say, wrongly convicted and they're getting out, they're like released or whatever. Them not getting the restitution they deserve. She was like, there was a push for like nonviolent offenders to be released from prison, like, because it's like prisons are overcrowded. And she's like, well, we would lose a very important labor force. That was her stance on it. So I'm just like, no, like, I know how I feel about prison reform. I know that the prison industrial complex is some bullshit. I know that it has so many issues. And so for someone who is, someone who's so supportive of incarceration, of mass incarceration, someone who is like heavy, like who is basically on the complete opposite side of the spectrum as I am in terms of prison reform, it's not really my people. It's like, you don't want nonviolent offenders to be released. You want parents who, it was like a 3 strikes rule about if your child is truant. So, truancy, like if they're missing school and stuff like that, then, the parents end up being like incarcerated for a year. Like she supported that policy. Like, all right, 3 times, your child's truant 3 times, then the parents are getting locked up. So yeah, it's just because, it's not for me. I'm not just like, okay, well, she's Black, blindly support, or she's a Black woman, blindly support. I'm really looking at what her track record is, and her track record just does not align with what's important to me. Prison reform is something that's important to me. Dismantling the prison industrial complex is very important to me, and she has very much reinforced it. Like her leanings and stuff like that has very much reinforced that. So I'm just like, no, sis. I'm gonna have to see, and part of, I think, to it, because she has received criticism and stuff like that, she has been responding, basically saying like, she kind of, in some instances, she kind of had to go with the flow to, get stuff done, or like, she didn't necessarily want to lean in that direction and all that kind of stuff. And my thing is, it's such an extensive track record of kind of anti-prison reform that I'm just like, I just have to see. So as she's doing her campaigning, because she's already done, what was it? She did like this video where she was like dancing to Cardi B. I'm like, oh Lord, you on some Hillary shit. But, I just want to see, outside of little stuff like that, where you're going to be doing meaningless things to try to appeal to a specific demographic, a demographic that you are taking for granted because you feel like we're automatically going to support you. I just want to see, what information she's going to put out and what she's going to say as she's campaigning about what her platform is, what her stance is. Like what stance is she going to take? Are you going to be like, for the people or not? So yeah, that's all I got on that. All right. So, something else that stood out to me, that is so funny. It's for me, it's like comedy, right? So, Gillette released this commercial, basically charging, men to like do better, basically. They're just like, hey, this is, we have like young boys looking up to us. We've been perpetuating like toxic masculinity. We got to do better. We need to set a better example for this upcoming, for the next generation, for the boys. Like the men need to, instead of this like boys will be boys type of rhetoric, we need to do better and set a better example. Not rocket science or anything. Cool. And the backlash, like men are upset. Masculinity is so fragile. Bruh, like dudes are not with the shit. They're just like, excuse the fuck out of you, Gillette. You're saying we can be better. No, the fuck we can't. Like, how dare you? How dare you try to tell us to be better? How dare you lead this charge? Or, how dare you, how dare we have these implications? It was just like seeing how guys were responding to it is hilarious to me. There's this guy who he put out a picture. It's like him and his kids, and he has 2 sons and a daughter. And so he has like a gun, and the 2 sons have a gun, each have a gun in their hands too. And the little girl's just in the middle, just standing there. And they're like, oh, he's like, this is my response to Gillette. Like, I'll raise my kids how I want to, and all this kind of stuff. And child, I was like, first of all, what does this have to do? Like, I don't understand what you and your kids standing around with guns has to do with what Gillette is saying. And it's like the fact that that was your response, like that's the reaction you're having. It's just so crazy to me. I'm like, y'all really feel strongly about this ad and about, not doing better. But it just shows you how invested people are in maintaining like misogyny, maintaining sexism, maintaining toxic masculinity and rape culture and all of that. Like folks are really invested in maintaining things the way they are, even though they are a mess, even though they are toxic, violent, unacceptable. But for some folks, they want to maintain that. Like they just feel like anything else threatens their way of life. So, the toxicity is apparently a cornerstone for their way of life, which is crazy, which is like, it's crazy for me to think about that. It's so important to you to retain this privilege and for you to perpetuate these toxic behaviors that like you feel like doing otherwise is a threat to your way of life. Like it's a threat to your freedom and stuff like that. I'm just like, how fucked up is that? It's crazy to me. It is really wild to me that that was the response. I mean, I thought the commercial was nice. Some people were really, really like emotional and just like, oh, this is so great and all that. And, I recognize that. I'm sure that I'm, to some level or like to some degree or on some level jaded. Because I'm not easily impressed. So I will say I'm not impressed by the commercial. Like, yeah, toxic masculinity is an issue. Yes, the whole boys will be boys rhetoric needs to end. So it's like, for me, it's like, this is, like old news. I don't feel like it's anything profound. I mean, I do think that, it's cool when companies take a stance on things, especially if it's a progressive stance, because that does go against kind of just it goes against what's typical for like capitalism and all that kind of stuff, because all of these systems are so intertwined with one another. But, I'm like, good for you, Gillette. That's cute or whatever. But I'm just kind of like, I just feel like more so like an audience member watching how guys are responding to this. And it's just funny to me. I'm like, y'all are really hurt by this. So I guess they're not going to use Gillette. But it's funny because, folks, because the guys were talking about, they're not going to use Gillette anymore. But I'm like, you're still going to use other products from the company. So whoop-de-doo. Like, I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make. I feel like enough people will still use Gillette and their parent company. I feel like their parent company is Procter & Gamble. I might be wrong, but I think it's Procter & Gamble. So Procter & Gamble makes so much shit. Like, bruh, you ain't hurting nothing by ceasing to use Gillette. Like, they're going to be fine. You have to get it's like you might still end up wherever you do get your manly razors. It might still end up being from a company that's under Procter & Gamble anyway. So yeah, I don't know if you're going to escape them. There's probably so much stuff that you use that's from them. So good luck with that, but whatever. It's just interesting to me. It's hilarious to me. I'm just like, y'all get so butthurt over like the smallest things, like the fact that y'all are legit angry. But to me, I'm like, it says a lot. It says a lot when someone becomes defensive about being held accountable. Instead of accepting responsibility, instead of taking on that challenge of unpacking your shit, that your response is to become defensive. That says a lot about a person. And so we're, in a society where male privilege is a thing, of course, men are not going to want to be held accountable. They're going to get defensive about that because it challenges their privilege. It's like, hey, you're being challenged to look at this differently and to actually unpack it. And they're like, hell no, I'm good. Like, I like my privilege just the way it is. Thank you very much. So yeah, so it's not surprising at all. It's just entertaining to me. Yeah. All right. So moving right along. Something else that caught my attention. Now this I'm gonna have to pull up because I need to read the actual tweets to y'all. I was cracking the fuck up over this. So basically, okay, so Kathy Griffin, she basically caught herself, I guess, calling out or going off on Don Cheadle for not supporting her. Y'all, it's cray. Hold on, let me I'm trying to pull it up now because I have to actually read the tweets. Okay. So I just thought this was so hilarious. Like I laughed out loud because first of all, the level of privilege and entitlement, like Kathy is on like 1,000. Like Kathy is legit on entitlement level 1,000. Okay. So she tried to kind of like, I guess, start some Twitter beef with him. So yeah, so I'm going to read these tweets. So the article that I read, was from Blavity, but so in like 2017, Kathy Griffin, that's when she did that picture, that photo shoot where she was holding up like a fake severed head of Donald Trump, and then she was talking about, oh well, people didn't support me during that and all this kind of stuff, and she just did some shit for shock value. It's like, okay, girl. The reality is no one is obligated to support your foolishness or to support you doing some shit that's like for shock value. So, all right. So this is what happened. what had happened was Don Cheadle posted a photo on, he tweeted a photo, and it was like showing him with the hat on. It's like a sleeping giant's hat or whatever, which is like a social justice type of organization or whatever. It's like an activism group. So their whole like goal is they're like anti-sexism. They advocate for like the removal of really like problematic publications and stuff like that. Like they're just like trying to put an end to like bigotry, all this kind of stuff, whatever. All right, so he had the sleeping giant's hat on or whatever. Posted his photo, mind his business. All right, so then Griffin, she was like, oh, so if you about this life, if you so about this social justice life, this activism life, based on this hat that you got on, then how come you ain't say nothing when folks were, coming for me for holding up the severed head of Trump? Like when I did that picture and it was so controversial and people were coming for me, how come you didn't defend me? Like, where were you, basically? Like, you weren't with me during that time. You weren't by my side. Why not, since you about this activism life? So Griffin, coming for him like, where were you, activist, since you're such an activist, where were you when I was being critiqued, when I was being crucified? Let's use that word, right? So she was like, so you're not really about this life. She basically telling him like, you ain't really about this activism life. Okay. So let me read her tweet, y'all, because she wild. Kathy, like the entitlement. All right. So he posted his photo. Her tweet response says, "Oh, great, Don. I will never forgive you for your nasty tweet the day my smear campaign started. You know it was a fucking smear campaign, and you have never taken a moment to apologize. Some liberal you are. Yes, my memory is long, my ex-friend. Shame on you. I kept a list. Fear me." Ooh, bruh. Like, first of all, Kathy really, she is like, she coming through with the Twitter fingers. Like, she really on some Twitter gangster shit. Like, I'll never forgive you. Like, watch your back. That's basically what she's saying. Like, talking about, I kept a list. Fear me. Like, I want you to be shook. Girl, that's cute. That's real cute. And then like, they were doing me wrong and you ain't say nothing. Like, where were you then? Like, that's just the entitlement. That's why I say entitlement on 1,000. So he responded and was like, huh? That was his response. Huh? H-U-H ? Like, that's it. Huh? And she was like, huh? You're a dick in real life. But believe it or not, I truly hope what I went through never happens to you. Never. And if it did, I would be the first in line to stand up for you, get my ass on television, and do everything I could to defend you and the First Amendment. It's easy, Don. So this is just fantastic. Like, oh, the entitlement, it's just hilarity. It is hilarity. So it's so interesting to me because it's very similar to, and I've talked about this before, but it's this whole, this expectation that, white women especially have of Black folks to like come to their aid, come to their rescue, support them, hold them up, kind of serve as a base so they can stand on our shoulders and stuff like that. That's very, like, white women are good for that. And so this is definitely an example of that. Like, it's like, oh, you were supposed to, come through for me. You were supposed to support me and defend me. Like, you're supposed to be helping me fight my battle. Bitch, this is your battle. Like, nobody told you to do this. This was your shit. So why is it his responsibility, and his specifically, to come to your defense? So that's so interesting to me. So then, but Don Cheadle came back, he came back. So this is what his tweet said. He said, sigh. Okay, Kathy. Number 1, we had one conversation on a flight about our mutual disgust for individual 1. I don't friend that quickly, so we can't really be exes. Number 2, had I been your friend and you had asked my opinion, I would have said, Kathy, for your own sake, please do not. Like, please do not depict yourself holding the bloody severed head of the president, evoking Daniel Pearl and every other painful, disturbing memory associated with it. Your First Amendment rights notwithstanding. And had you said, fuck you, I'm doing it anyway, I would have said, well, girl, be prepared to have the dog sicked on you. The Secret Service doesn't play around with shit like that, no matter who the president is. You're also risking your career for what I see as zero upside. Just tell him to I don't know what this hashtag is. It's like hashtag DIAGF. Like I do. Maybe you would have listened. I doubt it. So he said, number 3, taking every opportunity to oppose him and support those looking to unseat him is defending you, albeit not your personal cringeworthy photo op. Number 4, apologize for a tweet, and he just did the laughing emoji. Number 5, I'm sorry that you're still dealing with the aftershock of your actions. It's egregious. Okay, so it's just funny to me. So, you know, he responded to her. Those were his tweets, and he was just like, okay, girl, that's cute or whatever, but nah. You got me fucked up. So I thought that was funny. And then it's crazy because she has this is not the first time that she specifically called out like a black guy. And so it's just so interesting to me, like, why is she specifically calling out black men? Like, I remember on Twitter, like, she tweeted about Kevin Hart because she was like, oh, well, so somebody was asking her about like her comedy, you know, just like the style of comedy that she does. And she was like, oh, well, you know, I do a lot of like political commentary and stuff like that. And, you know, I'm bold enough essentially to like talk about the president and to talk about politics. And if you want a comedian who doesn't talk about those things, then you should, you know, listen to Kevin Hart. You should check out Kevin Hart stuff because he doesn't talk about that. I think it's a pussy move. Like, I think it's like, you know, I think it's, you know, he bitch made basically for not speaking on those things. But, you know, if that's what you want, then he's more your speed, like, because he don't talk about this stuff. And I'm just like, girl, okay, out of all of the comedians that you could have like referenced, and it ain't like I have some like special whatever for Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart is fucking problematic too. But it's just interesting to me that in the midst of when she's like called out on something or whatever, like that's who her scapegoats are. That's who the people are that she calls out is black men. And I'm just like, girl, this is so interesting to me that that's who you choose to like, that's who you choose to focus on. You know, she's like this was her quote. I had to look for it because I was just going based off of my memory. Okay. She was like, okay, so this is, let's see. She had an interview with USA Today. So she was like, you know, I do feel like this is such an anxiety-ridden time for everyone that there is a thirst for all kinds of comedy. And look, if you want to not hear about Trump at all, go see Kevin Hart. He doesn't mention Trump. I personally think that's a pussy move because he's a black man, but I guess he's selling more tickets than I ever will. Girl, it's like, it's one of those situations where, first of all, that was so unnecessary. Like, if you, like, you could have just plugged your shit, like, just plug your comedy and go, girl. Because if they're talking about, like, she's talking about this is such a time where there's a thirst for all kinds of comedy, she literally could have left it at people want all kinds of comedy, including comedy that includes political commentary. And so that's what I'm giving. Like, I'm going to talk about Trump in the midst of my comedy and people want to hear that. So that's what I'm doing. And because it's important to me, like, she could have just kept it focused on herself as opposed to including him. And it's like, you salty because you're like, oh, well, he's selling more tickets than I ever will. He's making his money. So it's his decision. You know, it's up to him whether or not he wants to, you know, offer political commentary. But my thing is, like I say, like, the political is personal. So existence as a marginalized person is already political. It's inherently political. Like, if you're a black person and you dare to pursue your dreams, that is political. So even if we're not standing on a soapbox talking about politics or talking about Donald Trump specifically, we resist by our very existence. So if he dares to be a black man, you know, making his money basically and, you know, doing comedy on his own terms, that in and of itself is a form of resistance. It just does not look the way that Kathy wants it to look. And it's the same thing with the situation with Don Cheadle. Him doing whatever social justice work that he does that resonates with him, like he said, he's like, oh, well, actually, I do speak out about this, and this, but it doesn't look the way you want it to look. So, you know, you're not acknowledging it, or it just doesn't look the way you want it, the way that you want it to look. And that's the thing. So it's like, you know, they want us to come to their defense. And this is like, I see this so much with white women specifically. It's like, you want, you know, black folks to come to your defense and you want it to look exactly the way you want it to look. And if we're not doing things the way that you think they should look, we're not doing them correctly. If our activism and our social justice, whatever, doesn't look the way that white women think it should look, then it's incorrect. Because obviously they are the authorities when it comes to social justice. Because forget all of the black and brown people who are about this life and who knows who have like so much on the line that it's not an option for us. We don't get to opt out of resistance because like we just resisted just by living. So forget all of that because, she's the authority on what your activism needs to look like. So she's the activism police, and this is what you need to do. So it's just very interesting to me. It was funny to me. Like I legit read it. I burst out laughing at his response. And when I read her response, I was like, girl, you are so entitled. Like what the hell? I was just like, she reeks of entitlement. It is so crazy to me. Yeah. So, okay, girl. All right. And then I've rambled enough about that. The last thing I wanted to mention was actually, it's been a hot topic or whatever. So people have started watching this show called Tidying Up by Marie Kondo on Netflix. And, Marie is all about like kind of organization. I won't even necessarily say, I guess you could say decluttering too, but I would not call her minimalist, right? So I started watching the show. I like it. I actually really like it because she talks about like if something sparks joy for you, like you let that guide you. And then she has like the order in which you go through things is because like you start with I don't remember the exact order, but basically the sentimental things you save for last. So you start with like clothing. You start with clothing, and like organizing your clothes and stuff. And then you move on to like your kitchen, your bathroom, like you move on to a lot of miscellaneous things. And then the last thing is sentimental things. Because she's saying by the time you get to the sentimental things, you'll be more kind of attuned to what brings you joy. And because that's the question you're asking yourself as you're going through these things. Does it spark joy for you? If not, thank it and let it go. And so there was some backlash because people were like, there was like this meme going around where folks like, oh, she said only keep 30 books and hell to the no for that bitch, stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay, y'all, she didn't say that. But some other backlash has been definitely racist, like people making racist comments about her. Someone was like, oh, I hate her anime voice and just shit like that. Or like, I'm not gonna like repeat all the stuff because it was some racist shit that people were saying. And I'm just like, okay, if this was some white woman, it's like a lot of the comments and backlash and stuff that she's getting, she would not get. They're like, oh, this is great, whatever. But I do think that the reason I brought her up is because, I've talked about in previous episodes, like this year, I really want to focus a lot on Black people, Black queer people, people of color, like us, marginalized people centering ourselves. And so in previous episodes, I've talked with people about how they've chosen to center themselves. I've talked to you all about how I have chosen to center myself. And I do think it's so important. And so I bring up Marie Kondo because I feel like in her method, in the KonMari method or whatever, it is a way for you to center yourself in your space because as you're going through all the things, your kind of like litmus test or whatever for whether you keep something or not is if it sparks joy for you. And so I think that is, you're absolutely centering yourself because you're like, if it doesn't specifically bring me joy, then I'm letting it go. And so I think that we can utilize that just in all areas of our lives, whether it's people, things, situations, whatever, that if it does not bring us joy, we need to let that shit go. So that's what I'm doing this year. And I think that we can, benefit from that. And so as we see all this stuff going on, like if something is, we don't have to like tune into everything. We don't have to stay up on every single issue. We don't have to read every article and, all that kind of stuff, watch every video. We really need to cultivate and curate what our lives look like, what our social media feeds look like, all that kind of stuff, and focus on some things that will spark joy for us because we need more joy. When you face so much oppression, like, you need joy. We need something so that we can have some semblance of balance. And so I really like that whole concept of like, hey, you're kind of evaluating something in your life, whether it's a piece of clothing or it's a person or it's a situation, and being like, does this spark joy for me? Like, does this make me feel joy? And if it doesn't, then it's like, all right, thank you, next, I'm out. Like, what I'm saying? Like, I don't need this any longer. It no longer serves me. All right, y'all. So that's it. I just wanted to end on that note because I know I was kind of rambling about a bunch of different things, but my one of my kind of like mantras or things for this year is definitely about centering yourself, centering myself, you all centering yourselves. So I wanted to bring it back to that in the end. So hopefully you identify some things that spark joy. If it doesn't spark joy for you, let it go. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to just me rambling solo. Thank you for continuing to listen to my podcast. I've gotten to the point now where I'm well over 5,000 downloads, which is dope. It still surprises me every time I see those stats and those numbers, but thank you for rocking with me. I'm like, I really am your favorite lesbian. So that's dope. And I have some stuff that's going to be coming up this year that I'm really excited to share with you all. And yeah, so until next time, as always, it's been real. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate you. It's nothing but love. And if it don't spark joy, get rid of that shit. All right, y'all. Bye. Black Radical Queer Podcast is all about intersectionality and Black queer folks sharing our stories on our own terms. We navigate an array of identities, and BRQ is an outlet where we can see the spectrum of those identities reflected, explored, and celebrated. Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javia Nicole, produced and edited by Charmaine Johnson. Music is by Publicity. You can find us on social media by looking up Black Rad Queer as BLK RAD QWR. We are on Facebook as well as Instagram and Twitter. Same handle regardless, at Black Rad Queer, BLK RAD QWR. We also have a Facebook discussion group that's just called BRQ Discussion Group. And you can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. So we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, Google Play, all those types of things. And we have, our home base that's on Libsyn, so you can listen on there as well. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you come on back around next week to see what we have for you. And all right, y'all, I'm out.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.